In ClearMind, we're taken deep into the psychological unraveling of a woman named Nora, a mother paralyzed by the grief of losing her young daughter, who tragically drowned during a pool party surrounded by friends. The accident didn't just shatter her emotionally, it shattered her entire life. Her marriage crumbled, her friendships dissolved, and she's left emotionally stranded, isolated, angry, and drowning in guilt. 1 year later, Nora seeks out an experimental therapy program known as ClearMind, a virtual reality simulation designed to help people confront their trauma in a controlled digital space. The setting? A tranquil lakeside cabin, familiar and nostalgic, designed to reflect the locations where happier times once took place. But in this space, Nora isn't alone. The simulation reunites her with her estranged group of friends, including Lily, Shelby, and others, people who were present the day her daughter died. Tension hangs thick in the air from the very beginning. Everyone is smiling, but the smiles are brittle, the conversation strained. Old wounds that were never truly addressed now surface with quiet fury, and beneath the digital cabin's peaceful exterior, emotional volatility starts to crack through. As the days unfold inside the simulation, it becomes clear that this is not a gentle therapeutic experience. The ClearMind program seems to adapt to the emotions of its participants, reflecting and even escalating them. Nora's grief begins to mutate into resentment and rage, especially as she feels the weight of unresolved guilt, both her own and that of her so-called friends. The therapeutic environment slowly starts to deteriorate. What was supposed to be a healing retreat morphs into a nightmarish loop of confrontation and revelation. Nora begins lashing out, emotionally at first, then physically. Violence erupts within the simulation. But what begins as symbolic expression quickly starts to feel real. Pain is felt. Death is simulated. But does that make it any less real? The film walks a razor's edge between psychological thriller and dark satire. It raises uncomfortable questions. What happens when therapy becomes a tool for vengeance? When the boundary between healing and punishment vanishes? And if one can act without real-world consequence in a virtual space, what does that reveal about who they truly are? Each character becomes a mirror reflecting some aspect of Nora's emotional turmoil. Shelby tries to maintain peace, acting as the rational anchor, but she's clearly hiding guilt of her own. Lily masks everything with passive aggression and performative empathy, becoming one of Nora's most pointed targets. Then there's Michael, Nora's ex-husband, whose presence brings old pain to the forefront. His attempts to move on are salt in an open wound. The simulation eventually spirals out of control. What was meant to be a digital escape turns into a battleground of emotions, a manifestation of repressed trauma and deeply buried truths. As the narrative reaches its climax, the viewer is left questioning, is this still therapy? Or has Nora created a digital purgatory for her demons to roam free? The simulation grows increasingly unstable. What began as a controlled and somewhat idyllic environment starts to fracture. Nora no longer feels the security of a calming, pastoral retreat. The cabin shifts into darker, more foreboding places. The atmosphere grows stifling. The once serene lake now churns with violent, ominous waves. The group dynamic also becomes more fractured. The emotional battles between Nora and her friends escalate. Each confrontation reveals deeper layers of their shared guilt. But the more Nora pushes, the more the simulation warps. Shelby, the peacekeeper, finally breaks down, revealing her own buried feelings of guilt over the death. She had witnessed it, but never spoke up. Lily, on the other hand, reveals her own manipulations. Her self-serving actions in the wake of the tragedy were motivated by an attempt to shield her own trauma. Nora's anger turns increasingly violent. She is both physically and emotionally confrontational. Her outbursts seem to be part of the therapy's design. But with each episode, the consequences become increasingly real. The pain of being slapped, punched, or thrown into the water feels undeniably tangible. And death, too, begins to feel real in the simulation. When Nora violently kills one of her friends in a fit of rage, the shock isn't just to the character in the simulation. It's to Nora herself. She recoils, shocked that she's crossed that line. And yet, as the violence escalates, Nora doesn't stop. In fact, she becomes fixated on punishing herself and others. The boundaries between the simulation and reality begin to dissolve. Every action seems to carry weight. The digital world has become Nora's prison, one that reflects her emotional state, a place where her trauma is not just played out, but manifested. She tries to leave, but she's pulled back again and again by the same cycle, confronting her guilt, confronting her grief. Now, the film takes a surreal turn. Michael, her ex-husband, reappears in the simulation. His role isn't just to complicate things further, but to bring out the rawest emotions in Nora. The pain of seeing him, still whole, still moving on with his life, rips open old wounds. Nora's anger flares, and she tries to push Michael away. But he's not just a reminder of her loss. He's a reminder of what she could have been if she had moved forward, if she had accepted their shared tragedy, instead of wallowing in it. It's here, at this emotional breaking point, that the simulation does its most unsettling work. The boundaries between what is real and what is virtual collapse entirely. Nora faces the final reckoning, herself. She confronts a digital version of herself, an alternate Nora, who represents everything she's tried to suppress. The cold, composed, calm version. The one who would have accepted the loss. The one who would have moved on. The confrontation becomes a psychological battle for Nora's soul. She shouts. She fights. She tries to destroy the calm version of herself. But no matter how hard she tries, that part of her is not going anywhere. The real terror lies not in her friends, or in the simulation itself, but in the version of herself that's been hidden under the pain. The final scenes of ClearMind blur the lines between memory, therapy, and torment. The cabin crumbles. The lake overflows. And Nora is submerged, fully immersed in a water-filled version of the simulation. This is where the tragedy occurred. This is where everything comes full circle. The past haunts her, and now, she is forced to confront it head-on. When Nora awakens, she's back in the ClearMind facility. Disoriented, sweating, shaken. She looks around. The room is white. The walls are sterile. The tech staff are quietly monitoring her vitals. But what's happened to her? Has the therapy worked? Has she finally purged herself of the guilt that has consumed her for so long? Or did she drown in her own psychological collapse? The ending leaves us in silence. A haunting silence. We're never told if Nora's healing is complete. There's no closure, no neat resolution. The audience is left to wonder. Has she truly confronted her trauma? Or has the digital world only amplified it? ClearMind forces us to reckon with uncomfortable truths. Sometimes healing isn't about closure. Sometimes it's just about surviving. And for Nora, surviving may be the hardest thing of all.